And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs.
Tom, let's talk about this brilliant article by Brendan O'Neill, which again is very relevant to.
Oh, it's painful to read, isn't it? It's painful to read. It's a good article. We let people die alone.
Yeah. So basically, the central point of this is that Labour, in order to, Labour are just they are honestly they're just inept, aren't they? But like in order to capitalise on Partygate, they tweeted out a tweet from an anonymous NHS nurse. In order to rub the Tories' noses in it. She writes, I remember 20th May 2020 vividly. I spent hours on the phone to a man who was in the hospital car park, utterly desperate to see his wife. He begged, wept, shouted to be let in, but we said no for the greater good of everyone else. She died unexpectedly and alone as the government had a party. Now, the point that Brendan O'Neill makes, I'll just read it out. It is astonishing that no one in the Labour social media team thought twice about posting this. The aim of this tweet is clearly to make us shake our heads and say, I can't believe the government had a party while the NHS was making such tough decisions. But in truth, it had the exact opposite effect. It made me think, at least to myself, I can't believe we let people die alone. I can't believe the howling grief of a desperate man was ignored. I can't believe there was such a complete and catastrophic collapse in everyday humanity during the lockdown. And he makes the point that to have a garden party in contravention of your rules is hypocritical, but to let people die alone and to subject people to the various inhumanities that they were subjected to as a result of these measures is far, far worse. We let people die alone. Just think about that. We let desperate, terrified men howl in car parks. We kept husband from wife, wife from husband. We let people give birth alone. We deprived the elderly of visits from their loved ones. We left dementia sufferers to believe in their rare moments of lucidity that their sons and daughters and grandchildren had abandoned them. We let people die alone.
The next passage is I think very powerful as well, because we've often pointed out that where the good is in a system like this is not necessarily an easy it's not simply that lockdowns are good because we're protecting people from death, because there's a wonderful paragraph, we had to do it for the greater good, says Jenny, the greater good. How much inhumanity and tyranny has been justified in the name of the greater good throughout history. The very act of prioritizing an abstract idea of the greater good above the individual good in the moment we find ourselves should be anathema to people who care about their communities. The good in the moment that Jenny describes would have been to find a way anyway to let that desperate man be with his incredibly poorly wife. That would have been good for him, for her, for their families, for the community, for the NHS nurses themselves, who would have known that they helped to facilitate a memory-shaping end-of-life moment between a man and his wife. Instead, they did a bad thing, not a good thing. They did a wicked, unforgivable thing. The idea that wickedness can be justified in the name of some broader good is the end of morality and the starting point of tyranny. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it just shows the moral blindness of our society.
It's like we forgot what ethics were.
Yeah.
It's like we forgot what ethics were. We forgot what morality was. Good is not avoiding death. Good is living a good life in the moment. And sometimes that involves living a good death.
Yeah. So in the utilitarian political philosophy, utilitarianism to begin with was thought to be too crude a philosophical instrument, because if you say like the moral action is the greatest good for the greatest number, that means that you could theoretically torture a child in order to bring about some good, that were possible. So it was modified so that to something called rule utilitarianism, where the idea is basically like you have a set of rules which in general bring about the greater good, but that means that some things are prohibited, such as like violating people's individual rights. So this kind of thing, it's the most kind of like crass form of ethical utilitarianism you can possibly imagine, because it's saying basically you can do almost anything, no matter how cruel to people, as long as it brings about this preconceived end of limiting COVID deaths.
And
that is just, it's sorry, Tom, just so it's not just a type of utilitarianism, but it's the most like crass, cruel, inhumane type you can possibly imagine. Because on this kind of logic, you could justify anything. You could justify torturing a child in order to stop people from dying from COVID. And in fact, you could say that children were, in a sense, tortured. You know, we covered the story of little Arthur, didn't we? Who was beaten to death by his parents during a lockdown.
But even more generally, you know, we've masked them, we've tested them into their life, we've forced them to isolate, we've kept them off school, we've kept them away from the friends that they need to generate their selfhoods. You know, we should not be angry with Boris Johnson for having a bleeding party. We should be angry with him for throwing us all into house arrest. Sorry for my, you know, angry swearing there. But, you know, because in the end, we've forgotten all of the principles of good medicine and good public health, which rely not upon coercion and law, but upon education and upon free choice. You know, and in a cooler world, this was decided on, as Jamie's pointed out, you know, that sort of slightly more nuanced form of utilitarianism said that you had to preserve individual rights in order, you know, you couldn't just quash them in the pursuit of the greater good. Well, what did we do? We ignored individual rights in almost every single way, and in the pursuit of a greater good. Cooler heads said that you don't coerce medicine. You know, you don't in any way coerce medicine. Medicine is something that, first of all, you do as little as possible. Second of all, you do it between the doctor and the patient, who have decided, you know, between them what the best route is. You don't have government ministers enforcing and you know and cajoling vaccination. You don't have threat of being fired. Because this is coercion, and it is fundamentally unethical. No matter what the good you're aiming for, you should never do a bad thing to achieve a good thing. Mega noto.
Yeah, so that's a good example, actually, the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because in a sort of crass utilitarian view of things, you could say, well, we should like force people to, for example, have the vaccine. Because it will bring about the greater good overall, because it will, you know, the virus will be less transmitted and so on. But in a rule utilitarianism, and I'm not advocating this, I'm saying it's a slightly better way of thinking about things, but you'd say, well, no, actually, because as a rule, it will make things worse overall for society if you coerce people into having medical treatments. So even though you might get a gain in the immediate, potentially by, say, forcing somebody to have a vaccine, overall it will make things worse. So we've developed this rule, which is, you know, people have to have informed consent if they're going to have a medical treatment or whatever it is. So at the very least, that kind of rule utilitarianism would protect certain values. Because in just a crass utilitarianism, basically there are no values, there are no moral absolutes.